Welcome to episode 475 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Hilton, and joining me again today is one of everybody's favorite guests, and that is Domagoj Kostanjšak. How's the summer going so far, Domagoj?
Surprisingly very hot. You don't get to see that much in Scotland, but it's been warm. We've been camping, even swimming in the lakes. I never thought I'd say that for Scotland, but I've been swimming in the lakes, so make of that what you will. But yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're celebrating birthdays, enjoying our time together. But yeah, I feel like today, I say summer vibes because today is that first real show where there are just kind of summer vibes. Where I could have done a listener question show, but it's more just of a grab bag of different news and see where we go from there. We do still have to do the season awards and say goodbye to the 2022-23 season, but I am still working on that content too as well. The next thing you're going to see on the YouTube channel as well is going to be the top 10 games of the season, all back to back. So like a 3-hour video, that kind of thing. Not all fresh. I mean, like reused content, that kind of thing. So that's what we're doing. We're glugging up my Premiere Pro with long exports and things like that to celebrate the end of the season. But yeah, this is also the kind of week where it really begins the silly season for transfer stuff, I think. Where like today, I read a report that Deco has recommended Real Valladolid's Ivan Fresneda, and of course he has. Of course he offered that kind of player up. He was one of the two most promising right backs in the league this season. He's a teenager with a 20 million euro release clause, and he's Spanish. Like, of course he was offered up. But that kind of deal to me, because of how long he has been, or the teams, let's say, that are going after him in the Premier League and the numbers that they're going to throw at him, like that's an impossibility to me. Like that's let's say a wasted story, but that along with Alphonso Davies saying Bartomeu didn't want him. Of course, Bartomeu, great. Bartomeu made dumb decisions. Of course, he made a decision that I don't want to play because he's Canadian or anything like that. Like, no offense, not saying that that's not a story, but it's just like, okay, I mean, another star, amazing player was like, yeah, Barca was interested in me. Of course, Barca's interested in every one of those players. And then for some reason or another, and yeah, of course, him being Canadian is one of the dumber reasons why.
Yeah, I think that alongside with Bartomeu not winning Mbappe, I think it was either Dembele or Mbappe, and then we went for Dembele. That was the story, I think, back in the day when Mbappe was still a thing. Mbappe to Barca.
There was the Hollanders too. Holland was like not ready
Holland,
something like that too. Like Holland wasn't a finished, or you know what I mean. Like he wasn't prepared for that level. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Holland as well. So yeah, Barca could have had every single player in the world. It's just according to reports, yeah, everyone was interested to in joining Barca at some point in their careers. Which I guess there is some truth to it because most players would not say no to Barca, especially the young players. Even if you are even if you lean towards Madrid a bit more, you still, if Barca calls you, you'll be like, okay, fine, let's go, let's do it. But we'll see. This summer might be a bit more different because I think Xavi came out and said that our financial situation is even worse than last year. Was it something like that? I think it was. So I wouldn't really expect too much from this summer. But now that Messi is off the agenda, I think that we can allocate some of those funds into properly. Well, I say properly. Now that Messi wouldn't be a proper recruitment, but you know what I mean. Just properly plugging holes in the squad.
Well, what's interesting actually at this point already is that the players that Barca is linked with, they have been linked with for a few months now. And as I always say, like where there's smoke, there's fire. So even though people say, oh, the dream situation would be Gundogan and Vitor Roca, and they stack these players on top of each other, it seems like the 4 or 5 that Barca are linked with, they've continued to be linked with. And I'm not saying they might be 0-5 on those players or whatever it may be, right? But in the same regard, like who they're having conversations with already and who they probably aren't. Now, the big thing here is before we do the transfer stuff, I've been talking about them as they've come along with the Kimmich story. We've gone over that here. But really the topic continues to be, and it's not stopping, it's who is Barca going to sell? And while I think for most of the season, those reports were, let's us guess. But now that the dust is settled, the numbers are what they are. The numbers are in the book. There are 3 names that keep popping up over and over and over again the last week from all the people that seem to be in the know. That's Ansu Fati, that's Ferran Torres, and that's Frank Kessié. And it's not Ansu Fati or Ferran Torres. It's Ansu Fati and Ferran Torres because we've also keep hearing over and over again, where you keep hearing the same thing over and over, it generally seems to be true. And financially, the club wants to move on from 2 of these 3 players. It seems like in salary, they want to get them off the books. And just doing the math here with Kessié, or Kessié makes the least of the 3. Ansu makes a bit more than him, and Ferran Torres makes somewhere in the middle there. So if you get rid of Ferran Torres and if you get rid of Kessié, next season that saves you about 20 million euros in on the wage bill. But again, we're also having to count in the future Ferran Torres amortization and all those things. So again, the transfer fee is not as much as you get from Ansu. I'm not doing that for the 100th time. I already did that many, many times. Now, as far as these players, and I mean, as far I know you're not a transfer expert, but you are an expert at looking at the we'll say utilitarian approach and the understanding of how important these players can be to the team. Their numbers, I think, are really interesting and telling of players that I guess, yes, would normally for a club like Barcelona be on the market. So for Ansu, it's 51 games played, 10 goals, 4 assists, 183 minutes between goals, which is surprisingly low for him in his career. Usually it's around 120, and more than 1,800 minutes. Okay. Reportedly makes third most on the team next season and the third most remaining money on his deal of all Barcelona players, behind only De Jong and Lewandowski. But the jump is pretty substantial between those two and then everybody else, right? So Ansu starts the everybody else category. A reminder, too, that because he came from the academy, there's no little special fees there. You don't have to pay out anything of the rest of his, again, amortization, anything like that. He is sold straight up. You get that transfer fee, put it right in your pocket, and that goes and helps the wage bill. Ferran Torres, 45 games, 7 goals, 3 assists, 270 minutes between goals, 1,800 minutes as well, and about 50 more than Ansu Fati. He makes about $5 million less than Ansu and has the same 5 years left on his deal as Ansu, though. So their contracts, they extend to the same amount. Again, with Ferran Torres, you have to pay the amortization on that deal in the way that you've done it for Ansu. And then Frank Kessié, 43 games, 3 goals, 3 assists, 1,800 minutes almost exactly. And he's been rumored to enter for 30 million euros. And we know that Frank Kessié, based on who is being linked with the club, I think we're almost at a point where I know Nico is likely going to go to like Las Palmas or Villarreal or something like that. But I feel like the club is. We'll start with Kessié here because I think the club really just saying, "Hey, you came on a free transfer. We did. I mean, his salary is probably higher than what whoever replaces him is going to be by 2 or 3 million euros. So the club, I think, is saying, let's get 30 million euros. Again, that free transfer is not going to hurt us. So 30 million euros from Inter, or whoever from Italy, just put it right in our pocket, and we're going to take that and figure out a way to get that again. 43 games, 3 goals, 3 assists from an interior spot, and who really didn't fit as a double pivot next to Frankie De Jong all season long. So let's just grab it and go.
I think that would be the right approach. Yes, if Barca can get 30 million for Kessié, I think that's a good deal, a deal that we should take. I don't like judging midfielders, especially by goals, but Kessié was kind of brought in to be this box-to-box presence who would give you that final third approach, that more aggressive kind of edge to his profile, and we've seen flashes, and sometimes he really looked like a player who brings something different, and that's what people have been saying about him. He is someone who brings something different to the team, but for the majority of his stay, whether that's due to his inconsistent game time or him just not settling or whatever it is, he hasn't really been the player that we kind of imagine him to be when he signed. So I think that selling him for 30 million and then trying to kind of replicate his contribution and the aggregate or whatever in his replacement should not be too difficult. Yes, he's a unique player on paper. On paper, he really is. But it's the same thing with Ferran Torres as well. These profiles of players are very useful on paper, but if they don't perform on the pitch, you just have this idea of those players, not the exact player that you need. So I feel like if we could get 30 million for Kessié, I would do it. I would sell him, and then especially if you're getting someone like Gundogan or even Bernardo Silva, I mean, there's no question about it. You go for that trade because that's an excellent trade. So I feel like it wouldn't be too big of a loss if Kessié was exactly the player that we thought he would be at Barca, which he was at certain points in the season. He was, but not consistently and not on a consistently high level. I think it's that we can manage without him, and for the sum that we're getting reportedly, it would be worth it in my opinion.
Yeah, because even if you again brought Nico back and Xavi didn't totally trust him, but you still give him 1,500 minutes and you're filling in 300 extra minutes there from. I mean, to not say assume that you bring in another midfielder as well, but there might be another midfielder on the horizon, or you play a different system. Like if because Busquets is gone, if there really is no, you'd expect that other pivot, right? That
Yep.
Kessié is being replaced, as you said, like his roster spot by a Gundogan or someone like that, and you're still bringing in an Amrabat or something like that. So even if Nico is not to return, you're looking for yeah, I mean, the tough thing is not the 1,800 minutes from Kessié; it's the over 2,000 minutes from from Busquets. So, I
Mm.
mean, there are minutes now available. I mean, in theory, if you trust three different players for, I mean, Gundogan, you'd expect him to get almost 2,000 minutes. But
Of
if it is
course.
not Gundogan, it's some kind of that next tier down. Then maybe you don't even go for anybody, and you say, okay, Nico plus Amrabat. But again, you're trying to get almost what 44,000 minutes, right? Like the 38,
Mm.
39 out of those two. And Amrabat, fortunately, is pretty. I keep just saying his name because I just, we're just fitting that kind of profile in there, a guy who eats minutes and things like that and plays pivot. Okay,
Mm.
but yeah, and I agree with you. For Kessié, you know, I don't know. The 3 goals, not that much, but you're right. Like I'm not defining his first season at Barcelona by goals because what would you expect of him? I mean, if he got 7 goals, does that feel different than 3? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how and when were those goals scored? I mean, that's what I've kind of been doing as I've been going through like the best games of the season and the biggest games. Like,
Yeah.
who scored which goals when, right? And
Mm.
how does that change how we viewed those players, right? Like, for example, again, Ferran Torres scored 7 goals this season. I remember one of them because I guess in the
Mm.
games that he scored, like they were what they were, and so it's like what contribution did those goals have? And for Ansu, it's a bit different. Just 'cause I remember like the 3 or 4 of them that like I felt like he was desperate to get right, and it was like
Mm.
okay, Ansu's turning over a new leaf, and I wrote that goal down. That goal mattered. And it was a 5 headline, and da 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 da. Da. And yeah, so now moving cut over to Ferran Torres and Ansu Fati. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like in your heart of hearts it is an and or statement because it just looks financially I don't know, like Domagoj, like if we're talking about pivot, if they're talking about like another midfielder or a center back or whoever it may be, I mean, Vita Roca, I think, is still a pipe dream. I think they're just trying to use that to give people hope that there's some young attacker coming. But
Mm.
that left wing looks very, very, very shallow to me next season because Abde also seems to not be a favorite. And so there is this world where Coolers are going to think, oh, they got Carrasco for the left wing, and that's who's, he's serviceable, but that is who their big splash on the left wing is for 20 million or whatever. And again, it'll be a 20 million release euro transfer or something, but his his uh his wage will be, I would
Mm.
guess, little less than what Ferran Torres makes this year, or about what Ferran makes, and it'll be 5 million euros less than Ansu. So it really like is Ansu worth 5 million more than Carrasco, or if he brings in 70 million, then you're taking 70 million. So really, Ansu's worth in that mathematical equation, he's worth 45 to 50 million more than
Mm.
Carrasco by leaving.
Mm. Yeah, it's a tough situation because when you have Ansu Fati on that left side, even Ferran Torres, I think both of them kind of complete that forward line almost perfectly. So when you look at profiles of players that you would have, like you have Lewandowski down the middle, and then a creator on the right like Dembele, and then you have that goal scoring threat, a runner on the left side, which both Ansu and Ferran can kind of do, or at least on paper they should be doing that. And I feel like it's a shame because that forward line with Ansu Fati, Lewandowski, and Dembele would be brilliant. When everyone is on form and firing, that front line really sounds good to me. So if you remove Ansu or Ferran from that equation and you don't have an appropriate replacement, that's a problem. But obviously, that's the part of the reason why Xavi has been going with this false winger kind of situation because what's the alternative? Alternative is to have a pure winger who's not doing his job, and that's a problem. So with Ansu and Ferran, they both need minutes and they both need consistency in game time. And I don't think a player who's not performing cannot really get that Barcelona. That's the issue here. So if you're not performing but you need minutes, I don't think that Barca can give you that because Barca are not a club where you can do some soul searching and to find yourself when you lost. You're there to perform, right? So if I can see why Xavi would be against keeping them, or at least, well, for Ferran, I think he'll get sold, definitely. He'll get sold, even with the whole amortization thing. I don't want to get into it. I'm not really an expert either, so I'm not going to go into it. But even with all that said, I think that he gets sold, and then Ansu Fati, he probably will leave. Now, if he leaves on loan, or maybe he gets sold and then there's a buyback option or something like that, that I can see that. That would be
Right, but the
it. Could
buyback's gonna be like 100 million. I mean, that's the only thing. It's just like that. Whoever
mm,
comes for Ansu is going to be a big club, and whatever big
yeah.
club it signs Ansu is going to want Ansu. So that buyback is again, it's going to be like 100 million for 3 years or something like that, like some
Mm,
astronomical number. Because I mean, that's the whole risk about selling Ansu. If you're selling
yeah.
Ansu Fati with that name cachet already at 20, and the things that he's
Mm,
already accomplished in his career and the potential he's supposed to have, then you're talking about a huge buyback number. Um,
mm,
yeah, and yeah, and I agree with you on all those points about Ferran and Ansu, but I also like half glass full about keeping them. Could this
mm,
season be worse for them? Like again, 183 minutes between goals for Ansu, who is third on the team in total goals, behind, well, tied for second rather, because Rafinha and
yeah.
Ansu both had 10 behind Rafinha, and like with Rafinha, he had 293 minutes between goals. And
Yeah.
Dembele, we're just going to say Dembele, again, function wise, we know, not a goal scorer, right? So again, you're going to a point where it's just like Pedri's not there yet, but he does score some goals, but you're also asking Pedri to do way too much. And if
Mm,
your pivot is not up to task, I keep kind of warning that whatever you think of Pedri, and Xavi says it, I would love to give him the ball 50 times a game more than he does. And pushing Pedri forward and having him attack and having him orchestrate and having him be the creator in the final third. That is what
yeah.
Xavi sees for him. That's where he wants him to be. But we've done this song and dance now with Koeman, with Xavi. If you do not have that somebody in that pivot role and somebody even next to De Jong that you totally trust, that means Pedri's gonna have to pick up the ball a lot deeper next year. And
Mm,
again, even if it is an Amrabat, like Amrabat does not shuttle the ball forward as much, or even with his passing, like
mm,
Busquets' long passes really opened up things. Like he
mm,
let the ball close space on the field in a way that a lot of players have to do with their legs because they just can't do it with what Busquets
yeah.
did in that way. So that means Pedri, even for that means Pedri's gonna have to check back to the ball 10 to 15 yards deeper, even for that pivot that is playing right in a deeper position, picking up between the fullback. I mean the center backs. So my concern is that as much as you see Pedri as a creator of field, that he's going to be forced to drop in a bit deeper. So you're losing his goal scoring as well. Gabi is not profiled and may not profile as some kind of goal scorer ever. You just have to prepare for that inevitability. Frankie De Jong,
Mm,
if you want him to be as a pivot, he's not scoring goals. Like there are two functions of
no.
De Jong. Is that if he's a runner, sure, he's scoring and he scores like 8 goals a season when he is as a runner like he was 2 years ago, or you have to kind of have him be your not to say destroyer, but yeah, your controller type, if you will. And if he's going to do
Mm,
that, which I think is his best role, as we saw last year, then he's not a goal scorer, and that is not the function of him. So my concern by selling both Ferran and Ansu, you better hit on that forward then. If you're like going out and you're getting a forward, you've got to hit on him, because if you miss on that forward or the pivot, I mean, that is now the margin with losing Busquets, not to say even Alba and Piqué and stuff, but by losing Busquets, there again, the domino effect matters all over the field. Carrasco
yes.
also not a goal scorer. So I don't know where you're getting that again, 10 goals from Ansu, 7 from Ferran. And so if you bring in a winger and they completely flop, or let's say again,
Mm,
Carrasco comes in and gets 5 goals or 7 goals like he normally does and matches Ferran Torres, great. You're still missing 10 total goals from last year. And again, you might get even less from Pedri if he's playing in a deeper position. And now you're asking Lewandowski, a year older, to score more than the 20 plus goals that he scored this season. So my concern, Domagoj, for next season is just as it is. I'm straight doing the math. It doesn't seem like
mm.
there's enough goals to go around. I was in, as in, sorry, not that everyone can have one, but I'm saying it's like not enough people even grabbing them from the table, like taking the party favors at the end of the match and getting the goal.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think there are options on the market that are like cheap, but at the same time that give you that many goals. Free transfers, I don't know. I would have to check. I would have to check who has a contract expiring. I guess
Well,
Gundogan
Abde,
could.
I mean, Abde's the name.
Yeah,
It's just right, like, but does Xavi not trust? Again, if I'm saying 10 goals, if you're selling
mm,
Ansu and you're not really replacing him with anybody,
mm,
like again, Carrasco and Abde again, is that duo good for 17 goals? No, like I think that
No,
they
no.
have a function. I see the
Yeah.
function in them, right? Like you and I we're all about what is the point of that player beyond
Yeah,
like goal
exactly.
scoring and whatever. But like, yeah, the function of those players, neither of which is to score, 17 goals combined. It's going to be more like 10, and that's not enough.
You would have to play with two number 10s probably. So Pedri next to someone like Gundogan, example, and then you have Frankie and Amrabat behind them, and then Gundogan and Pedri would have to be like number 10s, proper number 10s. They will have to be more like attacking players who would crash the box, who would be that box presence instead of being the build-up machines. Well, Gundogan and Pedri can both be like proper box-to-box. They can both be up and down, shuttle up and down. But in this case, when you need goal scorers, they would have to float across the final third. So not drop deep, and then Frankie and Amrabat would have to be responsible for securing that first line of build up. And then that also brings us to the back line, because if you have Koundé and they have Araujo, who's obviously an irreplaceable player, he's a key player, but then if you're kind of losing that aspect of control because you have Pedri and Gundogan being more attacking, you would need your back line to be tight on the ball. They would have to be clean. They would have to be able to do their thing on their own without having to drop additional players to help them. So that's another issue there. But I think you would have to compensate that through having probably two number 10s or just attacking midfielders who crash the box a bit more. And Pedri and Gundogan could do that in theory. And then the left winger, whoever it is, would be more of a supplier. So Abde or Carrasco are more creators anyway. So I guess you would get creativity from them and from Dembele, and then Lewandowski, Pedri, Gundogan would be your main task force. I guess something like that, maybe.
Right. I mean, Gundogan scored 11 for Man City this year. All right, and
There you go.
so
Yeah.
I mean, that's an insane amount of not contributions, but opportunities at Man City, even more so than Barcelona, like per game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just shift gears. This is a shorter show, so congratulations on that. I hope there are some people that do like the shorter shows and not the longer ones. So this will be a little shorter here because we're at 4 quick topics. This is topic number 2 here. Barça Athletic are staying down in the 3rd division. After winning the first leg 4-2 at home, Rafa Marquez's team lost 3-0 in Madrid to Real Madrid Castilla. Here's what hurt me on this one. The second goal was scored by former Barca striker Iker Bravo. Not only did he score the goal, but the celebration was a Real Madrid, as in for the badge, Real Madrid goal, right? And that one stings. And then the winner was scored in stoppage time on a penalty kick. So it's not even that the Barca Athletic failed to get to the next round. It's that Real Madrid in Madrid took their heart, ripped it out of their chest, ate it, Temple of Doom style. I know I'm dating myself with that movie reference with Indiana Jones, but they ate their heart, and then they also celebrated up in the stands with their stand, and one of the stand itself collapsed, and a few fans were injured. So that's unfortunate as well. I hope everyone's okay. But yeah, it's one of those where Iker Bravo, if a player still under the age of 20 is going to, or I think he might be 20, 19 or 20, if he's going to find his way via Bayer Leverkusen after a year to Real Madrid, right? And it's with the salary demands he has, as much as I would love to be I can't believe Barca let that one go. In the same regard, it's no, I mean, you get why they let him go. I think he was asking for $5 million a year or $7 million a year or something as a U19 player. And the only issue that I think for him was he asked to be part of the Barça Athletic or U19s, and they kept him at the U18 level. They wanted to go through the Juvenil Bays again, which again, the level makes more sense to me than the contract, right? The contract is in there non-negotiable. I think Barca should never lose a player based on the level that they're willing to play them up the ladder, if that makes any sense. If a player is again, like Lamine Yamal, and if Barca were hey, we want you to be Juvenil 18s or whatever, and he had been, hey, actually, I feel like even at 16, I'm good enough for the U19s. Just play my U19s and then negotiate the contract. And if you ask too much money, then you have a problem on your hands. But I just don't see, how you'd let the level they play at be the decider and all that. Because again, if you don't think he's that good, then yeah, Bayer Leverkusen was hey, you want some first team appearances? Here you go. And then Real Madrid was would you like to return to Spain and play for one of the big dogs here? And he's yeah, of course. I'm I'm going to be one of the. He believes he's going to be the next big guy. So I don't know. I also twofold question is there how are you feeling about youngsters like that when that kind of thing happens? And part 2 is for the for the Barça Athletic, do you think that this is going to I don't know. Does this disappoint you when they don't make it to the second division that much, or is it one of those things you just let it roll off?
Well, obviously, it is disappointing, more in the sense that how it happened and it happened. So,
Mm-hmm.
as we keep saying with these youth teams, it's as long as the players are developing, it's all that matters. Of course, you want results because Barca are a big brand, and success is kind of a part of that brand, right? So even if it's the youth categories, you have to have some sort of success, and it's also important for the young players to keep kind of improving, even though they might be staying in the same team. If that team is going forward, if that team is obviously making steps forward and progressing, then they also have that feeling, okay, I'm going somewhere. I'm not stagnating. I'm not here, down here, and then some of my friends or colleagues are up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in that sense, it kind of plays off the mentality of the players, kind of shifts their mentality and keeps them engaged. Because at some point, the youngsters will be like, especially on Barca, they will be like, either I get first team minutes or I leave or I go somewhere where I can get those minutes. And that's fair enough, because at one point they will reach that level where they are too good for the youth system, but also if they're not good enough for Barca's first team, then they have to leave, go somewhere else, right? And progress that way, because there is so much that they can learn, or there is the limit to which the academy can actually push them to. So at one point they will have to branch out and go somewhere else and find more challenges. And sometimes Barca, like the first team, is a step too big for that. So at that point, I would agree, just send them on loan or just let them go somewhere else, and then eventually, if they're good enough, they will come back if the club is interested. But yeah, I see it such. So progressing forward, like moving up a league, it's more about the mentality and keeping the youngsters engaged and giving them that feeling of progression. I feel like that's important, but at the end of the day, it's all about just developing the youngsters. So as we keep saying,
Yeah, I mean, I would say the reason why in this particular year I'm not that sad about it is that next group of, okay, maybe there's multiple players to maybe make the first team. That next group is the ones we actually saw kind of in Japan. I've kind of been saying that 16. There's a group of what are the 2004? I can't do the math. That's how old I am now. It was the 2004s, I guess, or
mm,
no, 2006s. Where the heck am I? Anyway, the ones who are like 16, 17 right
yeah,
now, like that include Lamine Yamal, Paul Prim, Hector Fort. Well, Lamine Yamal, he's still not 16 for another month, but you get the point. Like, so Hector
mm,
Fort 16, and Lamine Yamal is going to be 16, and Paul Prim is 17, or 18, whatever it is. Like that group that's really actually like cadet almost UNLB level, age wise, but not level. So
mhm,
I would say in the third division, like again, of what I saw from Paul Prim against Vissel Kobe, don't expect him. Maybe he'll do preseason with the first team, but don't expect him like
yeah,
in the first
yeah,
team or around them. Maybe, hey, who knows? You never know at 18, whatever. But that said, like I would rather him figuring his way out in the third division with Barça Athletic next year as an 18-year-old. Same thing. If Hector Fort is 17, whatever, I'm much more comfortable with that generation. Like
mm,
if Barça Athletic and the next group was 20 right now, like
mm,
let's put it this way: the years when it was Puig and Callado and trying to think what, well, like Araujo had just been signed, he was like one of the youngest in that squad. That group, I felt like they should have been in the second division to push themselves because again, they were like 19, 20 years old, which is much different even at that age at 17 and or 16, 17, and 18 even. So it's like it
mm,
depends on the years. Like I'm fine with 17 and 18-year-olds kind of pushing through because their next step really is the first team, like jumping
yeah,
at it's at 18 or 19 into the first team in a way that again Kayado was like, okay, he needs this highest competition he can get. Carlos Perez was another example. He was like 2021. You're like, is he ever going to get that chance? And he finally did get his chance. He was 21. But
yeah,
again, he had gone from the third division, and he felt like there was a little bit of a jump. But these 17-year-olds, not say they don't know any better, but they're either good enough for the first team or they're not. And this group with Danny Rodriguez and Mark G and Pau Prim and Lamine Yamal and Hector Fort, like that next crop, no disrespect to Casado or Chadi Wiad
yeah,
or some of the ones that you like from Barca Athletic right now, the next group is certainly the group that's actually younger, like the 2 or 3 years younger. And then even younger than that, what is the 15-year-old Pau Carabassi, the center back that is Barcelona's like favorite center back right now in the academy. He's still 15 years old. So transitioning perfectly to topic number three, and I guess I'll do topic number four here real quick. The Femini have largely returned to the Spanish national team, by the way, after we reported that last week after the final. Aitana, Mariona, Ona, who is again going to be signing for Barça Femení, and then Alexi Putellas have all returned to the national team. Sandra Panos has held out, and she is not in that team. And I mentioned him, and Irene Paredes already went back. So let's say for better or worse, like this is a really, really difficult decision they made. And I will say that I'm not going to weigh in. And I know that they're going to have to speak about it. And I am not even looking forward to. I am like with anticipation, definitely interested in seeing their approach to this very difficult decision. And if I'm the Spanish national team, they got their cake and they got to eat it too. And that disgusts me. I'm just throwing that out there. So, I mean, I'm hoping that their return also means that the Spanish national team, maybe after the World Cup, are going to look in the mirror and have some kind of resolution. Because, I mean, if I'm those players, if they don't change anything, the minute the World Cup is over, like the minute that final whistle blows, I'm out, right? I'm done. I'm out. Maybe I'm in like threatened retirement and whatever. So anyway, the center back transition, final topic here is that Barcelona have been linked and will likely be signing Mikayil Ngor Faye for 5 million euros. He's an 18-year-old left-footed center back, wanted by Chelsea and Dortmund as well. Joins from Domagoj. You're the perfect man to help me with this name. They're in the second division of Croatia. NK Kushishai. Is that close? Is that right?
I'll take it. It's Kustoshia. So Kustoshia.
I was not close. You
well,
should not
it was
take it.
kind of close.
Okay,
embarrassingly,
so
embarrassingly, I don't even. I've heard of the player, but I've not scouted him properly. So I'm not really the person to ask here. I will have to look into it.
Wait. I'm not asking if you're a scouting report. It's not. I'm never asking someone to watch the second division of Croatia if you're not like actively watching the second division of Croatia.
Yeah.
I mean, even until this year, even if you had been watching that team, though, it wouldn't help because he signed in 2023 from Diambar's FC Academy in Senegal. So it's not like he was there for that long, right? He was likely scouted as a member of the Senegal U17 team. Again, nobody's kind of not saying nobody. Okay, I'm not disparaging for any of our second division Croatia listeners. I'm not disparaging your league, but I am saying that very few Barca scouts, I'm assuming, are watching the second division in Croatia regularly to say, hey, that teenager over multiple games is impressing me. So he was likely scouted as a member of the Senegal U17 team, and there are scouts probably whispering from the Senegal U20 camp that he was also called up to. And so the wrap on him is he is likely a project. He is physically, he's already there. He's 1.86 meters, which is 6'1" for all you American fans. So he's kind of tall, but also not like insanely tall. He's a little shorter than Ronald Araujo and quite a bit shorter than Piqué. So I wouldn't say he's like some, again, gigantic, super tall, but he's also 18. So he still might grow in inch or two.
Exactly.
So physically, the profile is kind of already there. He, at this level, again, he's very proactive on the ball. He is left-footed as a center back. Like he fits a profile when you all look at it, and certainly all the tools he has as a project excite people. So if he were to sign and for 18 as an 18-year-old come into Barça Athletic next season, he would immediately rocket to the top of why you're watching Barça Athletic in the third division. How's that kid doing? However, and the question for you as we wrap the show up, €5 million transfer fee does seem pretty hefty after we just started the show and we're talking about splitting hairs on €3 million in salary or €4 million in salary. And the only caveat there is that I also want to remind people that the total revenue of the club does affect the salary limit for the first team. But the salary limit that the first team has to reach, meaning remove salary from, is based on those contracts in the first team. So it's a weird thing where the transfer fee of $5 million is, again, revenue that the club has to use, but in no way does that revenue affect the first team in any way. Like, it doesn't affect the salary limit. It doesn't affect any of that. So it's this weird thing where it's like, don't think of it as that money. Same thing when like the Femení make a big signing or handball or basketball, whatever. Like those contracts are different, but the total revenue for the club does matter because that does set the salary limit. So the club, they're not poor. Again, they have huge loans from Goldman Sachs, right? So it's like the club is not poor. It's just like, what is the salary limit based on the revenue they had? So, and some people are already questioning the $4 million from Julian Araujo. And that's my question about that one too. That even though he signed for Barça Atlétic and spent the whole time with the first team, was that technically a first team contract? So was that like $4 million that technically went against the transfer, the wage bill for the first, you know what I mean? Like, so that $4 million for Jordan Araujo, it could look a lot worse than this $5 million for Ngor Faye. So I don't know. And then seemingly there's a lack of 6 million for Fabricio Diaz, who just started and won the U20 World Cup final yesterday. Uruguay beating Italy 1-0. And
Hmm.
my only advice to everybody is put a pin in all of that all the time. That whenever
Yeah,
Barcelona pay 3 to 7 million for anybody, or like one of those young players from 18 to 21, we don't know. Like they might get it
hmm,
right, they might get it wrong. And for everyone they get wrong, they also maybe get 0.75 right? So it's
yeah,
just like
exactly.
you don't really remember. Like we cannot understate 5 million for Pedri, and I know it was going to be 25
Hmm.
million plus, like when with all the incentive that he might reach, but like
Still,
a 5 million euro transfer fee for 16-year-old Pedri, like not to say you're allowed to mess them up, but you do. You mess up three for every one you get right. And
yeah,
Pedri was right. And Araujo was right. So now they're going to get a few wrong, or maybe they get this one right, and then another two or three are wrong. So it's like in the moment, it's like, oh, what you question everything, and why did this deal happen? And some of them are seedy, but again, if they get it right, no one's going to question any of it. I mean, who knows? Do you really think that Ngor Faye or Diaz, who is 20 but still again plays in the Uruguay First Division, do we know who's going to be the better professional or the player you take in 5 years? I'm answering that for everybody.
no,
Like
yeah,
you have no
yeah.
idea.
Yeah. It's one thing to scout a player, but then there's so many different factors that go into it, especially a club like Barcelona, and especially when you're buying players from the Croatian league, and then they have to come to Barcelona, adapt, and there's this whole cultural thing, and the language and the environment,
Exactly.
not just the quality of the player. So it's very very difficult to say. But just on the surface level, like profile wise, he does sound like someone that Barca could use, not just in Barça Atlétic, but also like in the first team. But I also had high hopes for Mika Marmol, who I still believe has a lot of potential and is doing pretty well. So you never know. I mean, a left footer center back with a decent physical build with athleticism. I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, he sounds wonderful now, but it doesn't guarantee anything, sadly, in this world. So we'll see.
Well, fortunately, Domagoj, you are a
Mm.
guarantee. You're a surefire thing to have you come on the show. So I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time again. As always,
No
follow
worries.
Domagoj on Twitter, down the show notes below, and all that stuff. We are on Twitter and Instagram, TikTok, all those places at the Barcelona Podcast, as well as our Patreon. That's how I keep making shows over the summertime, as well as the YouTube channel. And I said it on the last YouTube video as well. If you could just, again, subscribe, all that stuff. I am reevaluating. The podcast is the podcast, I promise, right? So for the audio listeners, the podcast. But for the YouTube and the video content, I am trying my best behind the scenes to make that time worth my time and make it make sense
Mm.
for me to do every match review as a video format, 5 headlines, and continue to do the video content I did this year. And to do that, I do need to up the subscription numbers. I do need to up some of just the engagement and how excited people are for those videos. So I do need to like figure out a way to do that. And again, if you're somebody who somehow is listening to this at this point and not subscribed to the YouTube channel, that's just a big help. Like every little thing helps there, so I can again continue to figure out how I can continue to make those videos next year. That's kind of my veiled threat, if you will. Not to call it a threat, but my plea, I guess, to say. So thanks so much for listening to the show, though. Most importantly, again, this podcast is not changing. We thank you for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon, of course.